Cool. Hello, everyone. I can't believe this is our final Zoom call and that our 12-month challenge is coming to an end. I was just saying to Greg that I'm a little bit sad that this is the last one. My name is Anik Champu, and for any new people on the call, I'm the program director for Protect Our Winters. Welcome to this call if it's your first one. Got lots of people today. That's great. I live and work and ski in Whistler. When I say that publicly, I always want to make sure that I acknowledge and show respect and gratitude that Whistler is on the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish and Lillooet nations. The two territories actually meet at Whistler Blackcomb, so there's some cool history there. Also, should probably give a little snow report that it's really good right now in Whistler. But enough about that. Before I pass it over to Greg, our host, incredible athlete ambassador for this call, I just want to let everyone know that we're recording this call again. And when we get into question period or at any time, feel free to have your cameras on, unmute and ask questions. You can also pop them in the chat. So enough about that. Greg, I'll pass it over to you to introduce our speaker. And yeah, welcome everybody. Over to you, Greg.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. I'm on. Thanks for joining everyone. As you can see, I've got skier hairdo. I'm midway through a day of skiing at Revelstoke. So, but yeah, this month, obviously all the months have been different. December's an interesting one because it's really the most consumer driven month of the year. It's where you're supposed to buy everything. I guess maybe Black Friday in November might be a bit bigger, but really consumerism is going to be around. And one of the things is trying to figure out how we can consume better, at what we can buy. And, you know, we were talking to Cass before this, and like, really it's voting with our dollars. If you can figure out which companies are doing better and doing right, then if you buy from them, you're helping support the better things. And Cass has got who I'm about to introduce, Cass Osborn. She runs Hernest project, which is some sustainable clothing for PJs and all sorts of different comfortable clothing. And she's done a lot of research into figuring out how to make clothing better. So she's going to give us some great insights. And then, yeah, afterwards we'll have some questions with her and we'll do some debriefing. But without further ado, we'll bring Cass on here and you can really introduce yourself better than I did.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Anik. Hi, nice to meet everyone. And thank you so much for joining the call and being here and coming to listen. I really appreciate it. And I prepared a presentation in which I'll introduce myself. So I'm going to share the screen first. I'll stay on screen, I think. Hopefully we've got the whole tech figured out.
Perfect.
Better start at the start. Okay, like I said, my name is Cass, and I'm here today to talk about the fashion industry and how to make better choices for the planet and for people when it comes to our closet. Now, I don't consider myself an advocate or an activist, but I love talking to people about fashion and my work at Hernest, a small brand that I started in 2018. And I do most of the activist work through the brand, which I use as my voice to exemplify how we might do things better. So I started the journey in 2016 when myself and my very young family moved to Germany. And this big move led to living with less. We wanted to be really adventurous. And so we started by figuring out what kind of things weren't serving us. And through that process, I started updating my closet and trying to figure out what kind of things I could add that would really speak to my values and my mindset. And through a series of very disastrous attempts, I couldn't find the perfect pair of PJs. And I just started taking small steps to making my own. And fast forward 4 years, I'm here talking to you. I've done a lot of research and I've started a brand with the foundation of the values that I thought we needed to bring to the world. I have had a background in nonprofit and also in the apparel industry before that. So there was a lot of learning and research that went into this project. And today, the objective is for you to understand what impacts fashion has on the climate, and then to help you make better decisions when it comes to clothing. So we're going to talk about the impacts and why we're in this situation. What does sustainability actually really mean, and why it's important to understand it? There's actually a blueprint for the planet for evaluating businesses and government. So I'm going to go over that. And lastly, I'm just going to talk about the biggest impacts, the 5 areas that fashion has the biggest impacts, and how at each of those in each of those areas we can make changes in our closet. Now, I use the term fashion, but it includes all kinds of manufacturing textiles. So you can assume that the principles apply to outdoor clothing, gear, any type of apparel. So I like to think of clothing as something that's with us each day. Wherever we go, they help us get through our day, get things done. They make us feel our best. They're also a great portrayal of who we are and who we want to be in the world. But today's garments come at a heavy social and environmental cost. The fashion industry is one of the largest contributors to our environmental crisis and social injustice, and we need to do things differently. I usually start off these talks by going through the main problems. The first one being that the industry accounts for 10% of global emissions and 20% of wastewater. Now, in terms of environmental impacts and supply chains, they're massively misunderstood and not transparent. Our sustainable practices are lacking integrity, and greenwashing is super rampant. Maybe think about some of the things that you might have seen, like green labels, people touting sustainable clothing or gear or whatever without backing these kind of things up. The fashion industry is also costing human lives. One of the biggest catastrophes happened in 2013 when a garment factory collapsed, killing 1,300 workers in one shot. This sort of was a catalyst for a lot of what we're seeing today in terms of some of the organizations and some of the changes that are happening, but it has by no means slowed or made a huge difference. We saw in 2020 with the pandemic, dozens of global brands refusing to pay, $40 billion worth of finished goods, leading to millions of garment workers being laid off without pay, sending them into even graver economic crises. Sorry. And the third problem is that we're so disconnected to our clothes. Fast fashion has 25x the number of seasons in a calendar year. They're pumping out clothes at such low cost that our clothing has completely lost its meaning. We're buying clothes at an unprecedented rate and disposing of them after only a few wears. The average person, I think, buys 65 new garments a year, and those garments are worn on average 5 to 7 times before we get rid of them. If you compare that to, let's say, your grandparents, they were buying 2 to 5 new garments a year. So it's a massive increase in just a short amount of time. We're now making 100 billion new items of clothing a year. And when you compare that, there's only 8 billion, there's not even 8 billion people on the planet. So, I can't seem to move my presentation.
I'm not a tech wizard, but
there we go. Okay. I'm going to show you the first two minutes of an incredible movie called The True Cost. And I'm not sure if anyone's seen it, but it is definitely worth the hour to watch the whole thing. It's very emotional, and it really hits home on a lot of points.
We communicate who we are through clothing. It is fundamentally a part of what we wish to communicate about ourselves.
We used to have a system, a fashion system. That has absolutely nothing to do with the fashion industry today. It has been reinvented.
It's based on materialism. The problem is that comes at a really high price.
Garment factory collapsed, killing more than 1,000.
Clashes between clothes factory workers and riot police in Cambodia.
Last November, 112 people were killed in another major factory fire. 30,000 Chinese workers have been on strike.
Garment workers in Bangladesh paying the price for cheap clothing.
Well, the promise of globalization was that it was going to be a win-win, that consumers in the rich world would get cheaper goods and people in the poorer parts of the world would get jobs, and that those jobs would give them an opportunity to work their way out of poverty.
This enormous, rapacious industry that is generating so much profit, why is it that it is unable to support millions of its workers properly?
The actual business model is completely unsustainable. Unless you change that model, you can't change anything.
When everything is concentrated on making profits, what you see is that human rights, the environment, workers' rights get lost.
My God, we can do better than this.
So I've watched this movie a few times. I always get something from it, and it's shocking every time I watch it. It was made a few years ago, and what I did in the last few weeks is I've pulled articles that are recent from the last 30 to 60 days talking about all of the same things, and they keep coming up in our news media over and over again, and it's happening here in Canada, and it's happening in the US and everywhere. There's mountains of clothing piling up in the Chilean desert from the fast fashion industry due to COVID. There's toxins showing up in our kids' clothing, in big box retailers down to smaller retailers. And there are people being forced into labor to produce goods for manufacturers selling in Canada. So this is all really relevant, and it's all still happening today. So an important topic, oops. And the way I like to start this is by going through the definition of sustainability. So we're all starting from the same point. There is one definition called from the United Nations, which defines sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. So it doesn't tell us what to do, but it conceptualizes what sustainability means. It means you can't take what you can't replenish, whether that be from planetary environmental, and also from people. There is also a much more scientific definition, and there's one person that illustrates it really well, and I'll just invite you to write it down because I don't have time to present it, but it's called Sustainability Illustrated by Alex. And if you want to find a really easy way to understand sustainability in a scientific and globally agreed upon way, he's very good at illustrating it, and he's done it in a couple of different languages, and it's an absolutely beautiful resource on YouTube. They're like 5 to 7 minute videos. Really highly recommend that you watch those. The scientific definition concludes that there's 4 things we need to stop doing. That's the systematic increase of substances extracted from the Earth's crust, the accumulation of compounds that don't break down in nature, the degradation of our natural systems, and barriers that prevent people from meeting their needs. So that is what sustainability encompasses. Now, the why can I not go forward? Okay. The United Nations has also developed a blueprint for the earth, and they've called it the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. This provides sort of a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future. It's 17 goals, which are urgent call for action for all countries, developed and developing. They recognize that ending poverty is and other deprivations must go hand in hand with strategies to improve health and education, reduce inequality, and spur economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve the oceans and forests. I'm putting it here because we don't need to reinvent the wheel. This is a blueprint. We've been given how to manage or how to get to a sustainable society. And I'm going to show you a little video that kind of goes through all 17 goals. It's just like a little rap video, but I think it does a good job of really just summarizing it quickly.
The United Nations is an organization with goals of peace and sustainable development around the world. Their mission is huge, but we're breaking it down in 2 minutes. 17 sustainable development goals. Let's get to them, cause the more you know. Look, in some corners of the world today, people are living on $1 a day. Hey, that's not how it ought to be. So goal 1, eliminate poverty, and goal 2, root out hunger across the globe. There's 800 million people hungry if you want to know. Number 3 is health and well-being, and getting people the health care that they need in. Learning in school are the hard to go for. Education opens up minds and doors. Goal number 5 is empower girls and women so they can have the same rights that men are given. Number 6, people need water that's clean. Poor sanitation can spread disease. Carbon-free energy is goal number 7, and how to achieve it is a question that's pressing. But if we put our minds together and work hard, we can find a solution, I'm guessing. 17 sustainable development goals to improve life all around the globe. Protecting human health and the environment. Whatever bed we make, we gon' have to lie in it. 17 sustainable development goals to improve life all around the globe. Protecting human health and the environment. Whatever bed we make, we gon' have to lie in it. Now imagine that you work all day for no pay. Economic growth and decent work is goal 8. Goal number 9 is to foster innovation in infrastructure and industrialization. Goal number 10, inequality reduction. 11 is sustainable city construction. 12, well, that's sustainable consumption, so what we use matches up with production. Goal 13 calls for urgent action to combat climate change, cause we know it's happening. 14, protect life under seas. 15, protect life on land. Goal 16 is for peace and justice all over the planet. They're in high demand. And the final goal, number 17, is the critical factor, the heart of the machine. It's the strength in the way we achieve these goals of sustainable development around the globe. Yo.
Okay, so you get the idea. Now I share these two things, what sustainability means and what the blueprint for the planet is, because when you marry these two things, it becomes easier to understand what sustainability is and what we have to do. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, and businesses are actually aligning themselves with these sustainable development goals in order to achieve what, you know, globally we want to get to. So I want to just ask a couple of questions. Knowing these two things, what do you think sustainable fashion means? What are the parts of your closet do you think are having the most impact on the environment? And what do you find most frustrating about the apparel industry? What kind of burning questions do you have? Maybe write them down. You can put them in the chat. I just want to make sure that after seeing all this, or you have questions, I don't want to miss anything, and we'll hopefully answer them as we go through. And then if we miss anything, we'll pick them up at the end. So just take a minute.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on here. I'll just speak because I'm the host. I'm allowed to. But sustainable fashion to me, I mean, you almost just want timeless designs, because when you look at the 65 different pieces a year, like, can we not just like find out something that represents us and wear that most of the time?
Yeah,
it's pretty yeah, 100 billion pieces a year. I thought like that even makes sense.
Doesn't.
No, exactly.
Does anyone else want to say something, or should I just?
Yeah, don't be shy out there, everyone. I'm trying to survive the right.
I was going to ask whether there's a governing body or any kind of organizations that validate claims about sustainability for clothing companies, like B Corp or anything like that.
That's a great question. No, there is not. The word sustainability, green, eco-friendly, natural, they're used interchangeably all through fashion industry, through a lot of industries, actually, wellness, beauty, food. But there is no governing body. There are certifications that you can get, and there are many different types of certifications. B Corp is one of them. And I'll talk about a few other certifications the further down that we go. But yeah, no, there's no one policing the use of the word sustainability. Yeah. So there is an agreed upon definition of sustainable fashion. And when you look at the word sustainable, what it actually means, and the blueprint for the planet, this definition actually makes a lot of sense. And it says that sustainable fashion is an all-inclusive term describing products, processes, activities, and actors, meaning the policymakers, the brands, and the consumers, aiming to achieve a carbon neutral industry built on equality, social justice, animal welfare, and ecological integrity. So now you can start to understand all the different parts that make up a sustainable fashion company or an industry. And when we look at what we talked about earlier, or what I showed you earlier, there's really 5 things or 5 areas that there's more than 5, but these are the 5 that I'm going to talk about because these are the ones most connected to the climate and also on some level social justice as it relates to workers' rights. So freshwater use, overproduction, chemicals used, waste, carbon emissions, and human rights as it relates to workers' rights in the supply chain. So the first thing I'm going to touch on is emissions. As I mentioned before, 10% of global emissions come directly from the apparel industry. 52% of our clothes are made with polyester. Polyester is a oil product, and this is part of the emissions issue. Now, I'm just touching on the surface. I've decided to talk today a little bit more about polyester because as an outdoor focused, winter focused group, polyester will be very prevalent in all of your wardrobes. It'll be everywhere in your outerwear, and it's really impossible to get away from it. But there's better polyesters and worse polyesters, but truly the biggest thing that you can do is when you're buying new is look for recycled polyester. The recycled polyester industry has been around for a long time. It's doing great things. Recycled water bottles into clothing is not a new thing. And there's even ways to recycle polyester. There's 2 ways to recycle polyester, but the more expensive way can actually keep it into production over and over and over again. It doesn't break down as fast as when you just do a mechanical recycling of the polyester. So the number one thing I always tell people, and this will come up again and again, is just buy less. Buy less and wear your closet. You can reduce the carbon footprint of one item by wearing it 50 times versus 5 times. So you can reduce the carbon footprint of that item 400%. So if you think about doing that over and over through your closet, you know, the best thing that you can do is just wear your closet, buy less stuff. When you do need to replace your clothes, buy from brands made in countries with renewable energy or that offset their emissions. Look for organic organic natural fibers, not just natural fibers. Organic is really important. Organic does actually mean something, and the certifications around organic are very strict. And they use much less water, much less processing time. And recycled fibers like polyester, nylon, recycled cotton, recycled wool, recycled textiles. We're making so many clothes. There's so much shit in our system. We need to really support that initiative, because we don't need to necessarily always be making new textiles. In terms of water pollution is a massive issue within the industry. It is throughout the supply chain. So from the way that we grow our fibers, either naturally or the way we process wood or oil into fibers, it uses a lot of water. We then dye, or we then have to clean and or dye and spin, also using water. And then the end consumer also uses water in the washing process. So as a consumer, the number one thing you can do is wash your clothes only when you need to. So wash less often. Use natural soaps on using energy efficient washers on delicate cycle, and just wash your clothes less often. I wanted to touch on the microfibers issue, which you've probably heard of a lot within some synthetic fibers. So we're polluting our waterways as consumers through the way that we wash, and our textiles are shedding microfibers every time we put them through the wash. And the microfibers don't get caught through the treatment plants. They're also originating from our landfills. And when things actually do break down, they do break down into microfibers, and those microfibers are being absorbed and then going into our waterways. Again, those microfibers are attracting toxins. Toxins are getting eaten by fish. We're eating the fish, and on it goes. So there are things you can do to try to mitigate that. You can use, one thing I found is a guppy bag. It's called a guppy friend, and you can look for it online, and you can wash all of your synthetic fibers in there. And it does apparently a pretty good job of catching the microfibers. We have one, and I often pull out all like little strips of fibers that accumulate on all the corners. Again, it's looking for organic natural fibers that need less water to grow. Organic, certified organic fabrics can't use water irrigations or extra water. They have to use the water that naturally falls. And then man-made fibers as well. A man-made fiber, semi-synthetics, are things like tencel, orange fibers, pineapple fibers, cupro, sustainable viscose. Those things their technology is so advanced that they're going through a closed loop circuit using reusing all of the chemicals and the water within that process. So there's a lot of really cool fabrics out there that we don't need to be using conventional cotton or other fabrics that are very use intensive pesticides and water to grow. I've already touched on toxins a little bit, but you think about the industry, 23% of the chemicals used worldwide are used in the textile industry. So that's from growing plants, then there's the dyeing process. And all of this is leading to many, many people getting sick, continuing to be sick along the whole supply chain and onto us. Your skin is absorbing all of these chemicals. So again, it's choosing more natural, organic, recycled and semi-synthetic fibers that aren't using pesticides or spray within the growing process. They're not, and then look for brands that are transparent with their dyes and their dye processes. Look for garments and fabrics that have certified labels like Okotex, GOTS, or Blue Sign. These are all global standards that are pretty easy to find, and most brands that are using it will definitely fly the flag, like, yes, we are using that. And it's a way to protect yourself against chemicals coming either, you know, through the whole supply chain and then onto your body. Labor and working conditions. We've known for decades that most of the clothes are made in countries in which workers' rights are limited or non-existent. Production sites change around all the time, just always looking for cheaper labor costs. Just as an example, I'm a tiny brand and I don't know how people find me, but I get no less than 10 emails a week from manufacturers overseas in a number of different places. And the headline is always 70% cheaper than your current manufacturing process, guaranteed. So we're so programmed to be thinking about price. This is the only thing that they feel that they can communicate to me still in this we're 2021, 2022 almost, with all of the crap that's happening. This is still the #1 selling feature that they are putting forward when they're cold calling me. So, yeah, there's a whole bunch of stats here, but, you know, really it's saying that we haven't come that far when it comes to labor standards. And the best thing you can do when you're looking for brands to buy from is look for brands that manufacture in countries with strong labor rights. You also have to do a little bit more digging here. And this is the part that gets really kind of lost, is that a lot of companies subcontract. And that's where supply chains get messy and really not transparent and very hard to understand who's making what. So beyond just having good labor standards, you need a brands with labor codes of conduct. Codes of conduct are not complicated to have, and they can mitigate a lot of these things, or the non-transparency within the supply chain. And then on top of that, you can look for fair trade certifications and transparency for those brands that are perhaps manufacturing in locations that have weaker labor laws and labor standards. And then waste. There's the equivalent of 1 garbage truck of textile waste that is dumped every second. 5% of our landfills are filled with textiles, and the average life of a garment is 3 years. But when you think about the fact that we're only wearing it 3 to 7 or 5 to 7 times, meaning that those garments are sitting in our closets, being worn 3 or 5, and then basically going to the landfill. So the #1 thing to do here is you just wear and rewear your clothing. Again, look for fibers that will, you know, biodegrade and go back to the original state if they end up in a landfill. But also the biggest thing you can do here is recycle. Find ways to keep that garment in the cycle before it gets to waste. And I mean, Vivienne Westwood, she said it best: buy less, choose well, and make it last. It's not rocket science in terms of what you can do as a consumer. There's no hard and fast rules, do one thing at a time. It's a big learning process. There is so much nuance in this industry, and so it's very hard to, you know, make the best decision always, but you just need to be patient. Also, you know, not everything will work for every person. Everybody has different needs within this sort of how they dress and what they choose to do. But there are a few things that are fundamental, and one is buy less. We can't shop our way to sustainability. That's just not the way out of this. We need to choose well. We need to choose garments made from sustainable makers and brands. Look for the fiber content and the manufacturing process. Demand to know. Buy secondhand. There's big movement in that. There's lots of more options. I know for gear swaps, it's pretty easy. become an outfit repeater, wear and rewear. Like Greg said, know your style and yeah, go with it. Mend and repair. I know for me, I've been mending and repairing more and more because I have kids, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of mending my things and giving things more life. Washing less often, spot clean, and be mindful of the microplastics and the kind of chemicals you're using even within your wash. And lastly, dispose responsibly. 95% of the clothing that are disposed can be recycled in one shape or another. There are lots of apps, there's donation sites, there's selling apps, and then there's also lots of take back initiatives. Yeah, and there's also a really cool company out of, I think, Ontario called TerraCycle, where you can actually buy a box and you can fill it with, you can buy different boxes for different things. But one is you can fill it with your textile waste and they will 100% recycle everything for you. So if you have the means to do things like that, lots of cool initiatives to support. So that's the end of my talk. I hope it was helpful. And yeah, I'd love to take questions.
I mean, again, I'll just start speaking because I'm a host. I think that's all great. I mean, it really brings to light all the issues. It's not that simple. I remember a bunch of years ago, I was a little confused on one thing. Is I was with the CEO of Aritzia a couple of years ago, and I was talking about organic cotton. He told me that to switch to organic cotton would have 6 times more water usage than pesticide cotton. But yet your slide was kind of a little different there. I'm confused. But maybe he was just greenwashing me. Just kidding. But no, I'm just curious because yeah, that was the intent. That's what I'd understood from my conversation with him. But I'm not sure.
So yeah, conventional cotton is probably one of the most detrimental crops for a few reasons. One is because we're chopping down biodiverse landscapes to grow cotton. Growing the same crop without rotation over and over requires pesticides. Those pesticides are eroding the viability of that soil, requiring more pesticides and more water. It's also highly detrimental to the workers in those fields. Oftentimes it's in countries with very little human rights. So the last stat that I read, organic cotton only made up 6% of the entire cotton production globally.
Wow. Yeah, it's a tough one. I was talking to the Arc'teryx fabrics person yesterday, and I'm very naive and optimistic. And I was thinking, oh, well, let's just switch to bamboo or switch to some sort of, product, hemp, or I don't even know. But then you start looking at all those images of those massive piles in Chile and everything. And to me now I'm kind of swaying on like, let's just recycle. We've already created all this stuff from the earth's crust and everything. Let's just figure out how to, like you say, recycling seems to be the way. And she definitely brought up a couple of different fabrics that have been tested to be durable, and that recycling seems to be like more important than sourcing organics, I think. I don't know.
Absolutely. I think recycled, I'm 100% with you. And it's something that I've put into my business models to be 100% recycled by 2025. Again, we think that we've come a long way with recycling and it should be that easy. But when I say that we're recycling textiles, we are recycling them, or we are reusing them, but they're not often recycled into new yarn. Polyester is from plastic bottles but a lot of the fabrics that we have are blended, and pulling apart blended fabrics to recreate yarn is very, very difficult.
Yeah, that was one of the conversations too, was making mono fabrics so that then recycling would be a lot easier.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of questions in the chat here. I'll stop taking over.
Yeah, Paul Wright wrote that he said, thoughts in the ski industry on timeless fashion, looking at my 1960s leather mitts with wool liners that still work and work well. Not cool, not fashionable. I don't know about that, but here for a lifetime. So I'm with you, Paul. I think the rewear, let's make rewear cool again. yeah, that is the outdoor industry or ski industry for sure is a fashion industry, and lots of people switch up their clothes, not necessarily because they're worn, but for fashion.
Yep.
Kelly wrote that I have 2 young kids at home, and that's where I find it hardest to stay away from fast fashion. They grow out of everything so quickly, it's hard to justify spending the money on well-made, sustainable piece of clothing. Any advice?
Yeah, that is a tough one. 100% agree. There are some great used sites in Canada, used children's clothing sites. There's lots of, I don't know what city she's in, but there's also lots of great stores that have gently used or used items. It is a tough one, and I catch myself a lot too, because my kids wear out of their stuff so fast. Like leggings last about 5 wears, which is really frustrating. And yeah, spending so much on new things is hard. But yeah, we do a lot of trading as well with friends who have older kids, and just passing down, especially ski equipment and any outdoor gear. Yeah.
Cass, do you see Dave Schwartz's question in the chats?
No, I don't see the questions here. Sorry.
Okay. Well, Dave, I might be able to answer this, but can you recommend brands in the outdoor industry that are genuinely committed to sustainability? As a consumer, there are brands that I look to for this, but it's hard to tell sometimes whether, everything just changed on me, whether brands are greenwashing or not. I'm sure Cass has got some perspective on this, but I'll give you mine. I mean, I work with Arc'teryx, and I've been trying to push them forever, and they really have done a lot of stuff. And especially when you started looking at the workers and the energies in their factories, they've really been working hard on that stuff. And they haven't actually talked about their sustainability stuff because they don't want to be, I don't know, they don't want to speak out until they've done a lot of actions, and they're definitely working hard. And we all know that Patagonia does really well. And there's definitely some, if you Google online, there's some companies that even just test all these and will give them ratings. So what do you know about that, Cass?
Yeah, I think we need progress over perfection for a lot of this, and we need to be encouraging the right type of progress. And I think it's really hard to take a hard line when you look at exactly what sustainability means. I mean, even I know that even Patagonia doesn't come out and say that they're a sustainable brand because they're not hitting all of the points quite yet. And they're the most progressive sort of outdoor brand that I know. So again, it's not about taking a hard line on, this is bad and this is good. It's sort of figuring out how do we progressively get to where we need to be, because we can't do it overnight. The system is, we can't. We don't have the technology, we don't have the know-how, but where there's willpower and where there's just energy, we can get there. So I appreciate what you said, Greg, because I think I work in this space and I'm always scared of being called out about something. I don't want to talk about the things that I do because I am afraid that, it's not perfect yet. But I think we need brands to be sharing what they're doing and how they're doing it and progressing, because we need to set better precedents and we need to let the consumers in on it, because that's important. Now, in terms of what apps, there are apps. I don't think the apps aren't always, I don't know what to say about the apps. Some of them are really good. There's one that's called Good on You. And there's tons of people doing sustainability guides and brand guides and all this, but you also have to understand that a lot of brands are paying to be on there. So it's not completely transparent either. It's a great start. Don't get me wrong. Yeah.
And I think you just said it too, and you said it in your talk, is transparency. A lot of these companies, if you start looking on their websites, they'll talk about their blue sign, they'll talk about what they're trying to do, and their carbon calculator. Like a lot of them are coming out with their energy uses for the year, so you can start looking at where they are and what their goals are. And there's definitely more and more are looking to just show that they're being better and not perfect, because we are. Like, it's up till now, a lot of everyone's been scared to really speak out because they're not perfect, but I think we're finally getting beyond that and realizing that just being better is what we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question actually for you, Cass, about that. Is like, in the outdoor industry, there's definitely outdoor brands that are stepping up and being champions around this. Like Greg talked about Arc'teryx, there's Patagonia, North Face, and others that are doing a really good job on this. In the overall fashion industry and world, like, is there a real credible movement around this? And what does that look like? Like, is it grassrootsy where there's people that are kind of, consumers that are behind pushing it, or is it a top-down thing where it's these brands? Because I've seen, like, I can't remember who put it out, but kind of the filthy fashion type of stuff, and there's all kinds of brands, outdoor brands and others on it, but there were some that were really heralded for their for what they've done, and Levi's was I think right up at the top of that. And so and that totally floored me. Like, it was no surprise to see an outdoor industry brand, like it's more cultural for them. But is that happening? If it's happening at Levi's, is it happening kind of systemically through the rest of the fashion industry?
Yes and no. I think it is a grassroots movement in terms of the real, we're still at the early adopter stage. I feel like we're talking about it a lot more, and there's a lot of momentum behind it. The problem with fashion is that the system that's been built up is really not conducive to sustainability. And the way that we consume and the way that we've decided that our society needs to work in terms of always growing and producing more, it doesn't support this idea of sustainability. So there's a lot of things that need to change. And at the level of fashion, there's a lot of brands that talk about their fibers and their fabrics and their workers' rights. But as we saw, that's just one part of it's a great place to start, but there's a lot more facets to it. So I think a lot of the change, or a lot of the ideas, are coming from sustainable influencers and like thinkers. So people, how am I expressing myself here? So it's sort of coming from a grassroots place in terms of the real change and evolution and thinking around it, like system disruption. I think at the top where you're talking about is being shown in like how some of the processes and some of the systems can change, but at a very at the level of workers' rights and fibers in your fabrics. Does that make sense? How I've explained that? There's a much bigger system around the fashion industry that encompasses everything that we talked about, like equity, prosperity, and it involves a lot more than just workers' rights and the fibers that you put into a garment.
What do you think, Dave? Does that help? Was that clear? Like you said, it's so complex, right?
Yeah. I was trying to get to
any other questions in the chat here, or shall we move on? Grow, not group. Oh, I gotcha. Just PS thing is that small steps in the right direction helps us to lead to a great benefit as we continue to improve and grow. Yeah. Oh, we got a question. Yeah, go for it. Who's that? Dave?
Hey, yeah, just wanted to say thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. One thing I liked from Arc'teryx, I was kind of surprised that the bottle that the DWR spray comes in is 100% recycled. And it's not even, it's just like in tiny print on the label. So I thought that was kind of nice.
Yeah, no, there's a lot there's a lot that's coming. It's just, it's very complex, and what they feel is that a lot of it isn't the end product. It's actually in the supply chain where you can make a lot of changes in your factories, in your workers' rights, and kind of all those first pillars that Cass put up there. And I like I say, I was naive because I want to see it in the clothing, but you can do so many bigger changes in the back end that's kind of where they focused previously, but we're definitely moving towards other things soon too. Any other questions for Cass while we have her here? Nothing yet. Cass is sitting there waiting.
Yeah, I have a question because I know from a fashion point of view, like, you know, designing classic styles, things that, you know, will stay in rotation more often and have longevity is really important. How is that, I mean, how's that being translated to the outdoor in terms of the way that ski jackets are being made? And I'm not.
Yeah. Well, I guess with Arc'teryx, one thing they're trying to do, or they've been trying for years, is to always have a very similar style so that it's timeless. So that you could go back to 2005 and put that jacket on from 2005 and it'll be identified as Arc'teryx. What was really neat is we had all the athletes in the factory the other day in the Rebird, which is where they send all the seconds, the stuff that's getting actually put back into the fixed and cleaned up. But all the athletes got into all these boxes and were finding clothing from 2005 and 6 and whatever, and like wearing them and took them because they were like, oh, there's nothing really wrong with this, and they love that the style was timeless and that, you know, it was unique. And it was actually really exciting. It kind of inspired a lot of other things that are going to happen. But yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one because we just want durability is what most companies are preaching. If you can make something last a lot longer, that'll really decrease its footprint. But yeah, I mean, all the companies are trying. Gore-Tex has come out with a new membrane that's ETFE instead of EPTFE, and it uses half the material. So right there, you're still creating the same product in the end, but it's using half the material, so it's a lot less intensive that way. Which, you know, if you look at all your recycling and just half it, that's a big move. But things are progressing, especially because the outdoors, these people want to be stewards for nature and their companies.
Cool.
Yeah, it's great. I think that companies are working on durability, and for sure, you know, sometimes you find a product just doesn't last. But I do think there's an issue with fashion, you know, wanting to have something new, wanting to be fashionable. And I love that what Arc'teryx is doing and maybe even using athlete influencers to kind of bring these trends around that, you know, the rewear is cool and we need to change that mentality. I mean, I'm a victim of it too, wanting to be fashionable. But I think we need to rethink that. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Cass, on how to kind of bridge the two.
Yeah, it's hard. I live in Europe, so I feel like the trends here are a little bit different. And what's really happening here is a very genderless trend. So gender neutral things, but also a huge rewear, vintage. So vintage is huge. It's very fashionable. And all of the normal sort of fashion, whatever stereotypes are out the window, like prints and plaids and clashing colors and outfits that absolutely make no sense, like that you absolutely look like would be from a vintage shop is in, right? Like this is what awesome. People are wearing. And I think that's super encouraging. And yeah, I don't know what the I don't know what the answer is. I mean, from what I do, I get often people ask me, can you make more colors? I want it in more colors. I want it in purple and I want it in this. And I struggle with it a lot because I do follow, you know, color trends and this and that. And I know that certain colors will be more popular this year. And I try to stay away from it, but it's very hard because that's what people want to shop. And trying to stay classic and lasting is also difficult because classic and lasting in fashion right now, as we mentioned, is like, you know, a week long in the fast fashion industry because they're constantly pumping out new things. I also wanted to touch on the point of longevity. You know, a lot of times when we're choosing natural fabrics and or recycled and or choosing more innovative options, we're still at the pretty early adopter stage of that too. Like I struggle with it as well in terms of, you know, creating these innovative fabrics that are biodegradable that have a lot of the same properties as, you know, you'd find in athletic wear, but it's not athletic wear. And the thing with petrol-based things like spandex and lycra is that they've changed our expectation of the longevity of things. When you think of a natural fabric, I mean, it biodegrades within a few months, you know, a year at the most, and nylon and polyester stay in nature for 400 years. It's really hard to find more sustainable options that are less, you know, detrimental to when you're comparing those things and trying to find, you know, great alternatives or great alternative innovative solutions to these problems.
Oh, that video you started at the start was so the truth or whatever. I don't even want to watch that. I just don't want to be a human anymore. But the truth is, at least, I mean, I'll kind of take this all to a close now because you can tell that there's lots of us that care, right? There's these people on this chat. There's the 1,400 people that signed up for this 12-month challenge, where there's a lot of us that want to change. And the more of us that kind of change our mindsets is it's going to happen. You know, they say about 5% of the population is needed to really create change. And I feel like we're really getting there soon. So, but yeah, I'll just say thanks a lot for everyone for joining the challenge. I think it's been really informative for me. There's been some that have worked. I finally got a new bank account with Van City the other day. So I kind of switched that one, and all the different all the different months have been good. They've challenged me in different ways, and hopefully they've challenged you and you've learned lots. And afterwards, I got in touch with quite a few of the people to see where the changes could be or where we're going forward. And we're not really sure what POW is going to do next year, whether we'll do a 12-month challenge or whether we'll just offer personal carbon footprint challenges or changes, or we're not really exactly sure. You can see Bill Barrett's knees here, though. He's got nice knees.
I'm relaxing.
But thanks a lot for everyone for just being open to changing and being willing to just be a little bit better. And hopefully it's been an informative year for you and that you've gained lots of things, and get your monthly reflections in at the end of this month. And if you have any thoughts on what we could do in the future or anything, just kind of bring them up now or bring them up in those reflections so we can just kind of continue help be making the world a better place and making changes.